Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for having this very insightful hearing today. And first off, I want to add my voice to the thanks to Senator Lieberman and Congresswoman Harman for your service to our country, and in general for your service in the 101st Airborne, 10th Mountain Division, 1st Brigade. The Chairman and I were able to visit with the 3rd Brigade combat team in Afghanistan in November 2011, and the memories that I have of the men and women that are serving in harm's way go a long way. And I just want to thank everyone that's serving to fight and counter the elements that we're talking about today around the globe, whether it's in the southern Philippines or Afghanistan or where it may be. Senator Lieberman, I want to also thank you for some comments in your opening statement when you said, let me underscore here, the enemy is violent Islamist extremism, a political ideology that seeks to justify totalitarian governance by perverting religion. The enemy, we can never stress enough, is not Islam itself. It's the Islamist extremists that use a religion for its own use and gain. So I want to shift gears from some of the topics that we've talked about today, because we're talking about a false narrative that endangers the homeland. And as I sat here and listened to some of the testimony, I thought about the false narrative with respect to our nation's borders, and that's the use of the term operational control, and that we have a secure southern border. So I want to ask each of you, in your opinion, how does border security, specifically the southern border in this instance, but we can't limit it just to the southern border. We have a long northern border with huge ports of entry. We have ocean and seaports, airports that are all playing into that border security element. So how does national border security play into your thoughts with regard to national security, countering al-Qaeda elements, countering any other threats, but also the false narrative of an operational control element? So I'll start with Senator Lieberman.
Thanks, Congressman. Thanks for your kind words. Let me begin the discussion. I've been out for about a year, so I don't know the latest, but part of the challenge post 9/11 was not just the security privacy tension, but how do we maintain security in a country that has historically been as open as ours, and that includes the geographical fate of America, which has always protected us. We're surrounded by 2 oceans. We have historically friendly allies to the north and south. We have enormous borders. And you're never going to really maintain full security unless you do your best on those borders. I think we've come a long way since 9/11 toward achieving that. We're probably doing better at airport and airline security than we are at some other places. We've improved, I think, our ability at points of entry on the north and the south borders to stop people who want to do us harm from coming in. The southern border is obviously a unique problem because of the enormous flows of people across that border, including obviously illegal immigrants. So bottom line, if you're talking about homeland security, you've got to, in the post 9/11 age, protect your borders, all of them, air, sea, land. And we've done a lot better. But this is one of those journeys that doesn't have an end point. We're just going to keep having to do better and better.
Right. And let me just, before I go to Congresswoman Harman, let me just remind everyone that Hezbollah has exploited our southern border.
That is correct.
And so, Ms. Harman.
Thank you. I think it's an important question, and this committee should take a victory lap for its authorship of the Safe Ports Act. About 5 years ago. It was a bipartisan law that passed the House and Senate, was signed, I think, by President Bush. I think it was President Obama. But what we did is push our borders out. We thought about how important it is to inspect cargo, for example, at the port, at the point of embarkation on ships, and then to lock down those ships, and then, of course, to have security at the actual ports of entry. But we called it layered security. And that layered security approach is now the approach that we take at our airports as well, in a variety of ways. So there really should be an appreciation of that. On the physical land borders, Canada and the southern border, I just point out that so far as I know, and again, I may be a little stale, more terrorists have tried to enter our country through the Canadian border than through the southern border. That doesn't mean the southern border doesn't matter. Of course it does. But one of the early bad guys that an astute, I think, customs official was able to spot was a guy named Ahmed Rassam, who was trying to cross the Canadian border in Washington State with a rental car full of explosives, and his intended target was LAX, then in my congressional district. So, of course, I would remember that and think it was a heroic act to have stopped the guy. But, yes, looking at all the borders, as you have described, should remain a high priority. But let's not forget that homegrown terrorists who are already here, many of them legally, are getting radicalized on the Internet, but also by live people in their neighborhoods. And we have to keep a focus on that.
Absolutely. General, can you give a military perspective on that real quickly?
Well, from our perspective, I think what our intelligence agencies have done to thwart, terrorism is really notable since 9/11, and the cooperation that these agencies have. I'm convinced in my own mind that no amount of fencing in of itself is going to stop and deter terrorists from getting into this country. What we have to do is stay focused on them. We have to be into their phone conversations. We have to be into their Internet. We have to know what their thinking is, and we have to stop those kind of activities before they start. So our intelligence services, yes, the National Security Agency, the extraordinary work that they've been able to do is really critical to stopping this. Do we need a secure border in the southern part of the United States, given all the problems associated with it? Certainly we do. But the focus, and as Congresswoman mentioned, the focus we have taken in the layered approach where it begins overseas is really critical for us, and we've had a lot of success as a result of it. So the resources that are necessary for that kind of work is something that you are all doing, and I applaud you for it.
I think one of the more interesting discussions on this came from the bin Laden documents from the Abbottabad compound, where senior al-Qaeda leaders noted two things that I would highlight on the subject. One is frustration at the closed borders and the progress the United States had made in making it more difficult for them to get inside, actually hearing it from senior leaders themselves, but also the commitment of finding and exploiting ways to get inside of the homeland, whether it was individuals, as bin Laden had said at one point, trying to get somebody with a Mexican visa that they could smuggle through the southern border or elsewhere. Look, we've had people leave the United States and go to train with militant groups overseas, senior levels of al-Shabaab, Syrians, other locations, Afghanistan as well, and Pakistan. We've had people that have come back and been involved in plots, and we had not discovered them. Zazi, Shahzad, Abdul Muttalib were all back in the United States when they were involved in plots.
The Boston bombers.
Yeah, exactly, the Boston bombers. So this will remain a problem. I think the issue with our border security has got to be that border security is good up until the point that it has useful intelligence. I think one of the aspects about this then is, and this is where Syria comes back into the picture, we're only as good as people whose names we have access to and we can pass to folks on the border security. One concern I've had in talking to folks that we have working in and around Syria is we don't know all the people over there. We know many of them, but not all of them. If those names don't get on lists, they don't get back to border security, they can come in or out without being stopped. So I would then fuse those two issues of border security and intelligence as being crucial and potentially vulnerable if we don't have access to the information.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Mr. Chairman, I want to point the committee to an article in the Weekly Standard by Thomas Joslin, Know Your Enemy, Al-Qaeda's Grand Strategy. I'd like to enter this for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.